Great.
Cool. Okay. Hi, India.
Hello. Thanks for
Hi.
having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so grateful to have you on. I just finished watching Seduced, probably like 2 months ago. And so it's really exciting to talk to you. We were just briefly touching on The Vow and Seduced, and first of all, I feel like we should explain to the listeners, if they haven't watched either documentary, if they aren't completely aware of NXIVM, I want to let you kind of explain who you are and your involvement, just to lay that out there.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat. Basically, NXIVM was a criminal organization that proposed and explained themselves more or less as self-help. And that was the way that they were able to conceal a lot of their criminal activity by having fronts and kind of consumer-friendly products that they sold to people. One of which was executive success programs that I took with my mother back in 2011. My name is India, and I grew up here in Southern California. And I unfortunately found myself in the belly of the beast, which was Keith Raniere. I spent 7 years in NXIVM, 2 of those years very intensely in a group called DOS, which was a secret sorority of women that was intended to be, or let's rephrase that, not intended to be, but was pitched to me as a female empowerment group. And ultimately what I learned it was a funnel in which women were being groomed for Keith Raniere to be used as sex slaves, but also as pawns for his bigger, greater world domination scheme. And I know that sounds really crazy and weird and sci-fi, but that's the type of man that we were dealing with, someone who is really an extreme narcissist and has quite a challenging pathology for even me to understand. So it's taken me a while to figure out who I was dealing with for the past 7 years of my life.
Yeah, I'd say like what really stood out to me was your inner strength and the way that you advocated for yourself and the vulnerability that you had. And what I really loved about Seduce specifically was like, it's, you know, straight from your point of view. And it was, and I felt like the way that you were able to speak about everything that happened, which was obviously very traumatic, like I thought you really presented yourself in such a strong way. And I have like the chill saying this because I feel like, you know, so many people have been through horrible experience. It's not easy to talk about. Like, I first want to like say that, like, you know, I personally was involved with the whole Harvey Weinstein thing. And yeah, I was one of the,
I understand completely.
In a different way, you know, I don't want to in any way like compare myself to you. It's like under the same umbrella of like, you know,
predatory behavior.
Exactly. So like for me personally, like I literally had one interview, and that with the Washington Journal, and then that gets blasted out to everywhere. So like I was a part of this ride. I did one podcast. That's literally all I did, but my story was duplicated so much. And I had a really hard time with the aftermath of everything. And what felt like cathartic conversations turned into a lot of like hate message. Yeah, don't do it. Turned into like a lot of hate messages from strangers. And like, so
who do you think you are?
Yes.
It. I mean, there's so much victim shaming. It's sick. And I that was one of the things. It is not easy to talk about this thing.
Yeah.
First of all, alone with a therapist, hard. Then on top of it, to speak to the FBI for 9 months plus and go through everything over and over again in a very linear way. And if you've ever worked with the government, or if you've ever had to be a cooperating witness, you know that that is not a glamorous experience. And it's not the way that they paint it on TV shows at all. It takes a lot out of you. And I think for me, there was a point where I mean, when you're a cooperating witness, you're told you do not speak to anybody. You are literally siloed. And so I was processing what I had just gone through with strangers for the first time. I had never really spoken about this stuff. So when it came to actually telling my story, that took a while to make that decision.
Mhm.
I was not interested in speaking about this at all. I thought I remember my now fiance, then boyfriend, we our house burned down in the Woolsey fires in 2018. And so from
Oh.
there, another cherry on the top that was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, how can this get any worse? And so we lose everything and we relocate to Colorado. And from there, I'm
Oh,
going from
cool.
Colorado to New York, well, Brooklyn specifically, to work with
Yeah.
the FBI. Not allowed to talk to anybody. And I'm coming back to Colorado in the midst of winter. And I'm literally like, what the fuck is going on? Because
Mhm.
all of these memories started to come up
Yeah.
that were dormant for years, all these things that
Mhm.
I had suppressed that were coming up while I was working with the FBI. And then I would come home to my poor boyfriend at the time and just be a wreck, like so messy, processing all of this stuff, trying to figure out if I was a freaking monster. And then on top of it, we're just kind of starting to get to know each other. And I'm telling you, you have literally gotten me at my worst. And I didn't know when
Oh,
that was going to end. And I think
yeah.
anyone who has experienced trauma or any kind of difficult situation can relate to just this tumultuous feeling of confusion and not knowing how you're going to move on and how you're
Mhm.
going to get through it. And so I was kind of stuck in that place, reeling in my own head, feeling totally depressed and suicidal,
Of
and
course,
thinking,
yeah.
I don't ever want to talk about this. I want this to disappear. I'm going to change my goddamn name and I'm going to, I was babysitting at the time, which was like my only sense of relief was working with kids because otherwise when I was alone, I was like
Mhm.
miserable. So I get why a lot of people don't speak out because you're met with both the social judgment of, other people's opinions about you, and then on top of it, you're going through your own shit,
Mhm.
and that's hard enough. So really for me, it started with writing, and that was kind of like my only way privately to get what was going on inside of me out. And then from there, I took some time to just focus on my healing, and it wasn't until months later that, like 6 months later, that Cecilia Pack and Inbal Lesnar, the two creators and co-producers with me, even gave me a call to
Mhm.
talk about what was then just Untitled Women's Project, which then became Seduced. And I was scared and I was nervous to put myself out there. I didn't know that I was going to be like the centerpiece of the docu-series at the time, but the more we started to share about my experiences and the way that I could explain what happened in NXIVM and what NXIVM was, we we began to work together. And it was a safe and respectful environment. It was pretty much entirely women led. And so I kind of started to open up there. I hadn't spoken to anyone besides my closest family or the FBI until then. So
Had
it
you
was
been
not an
working with
easy
a
decision.
therapist before? Okay,
Oh yeah.
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 I mean, oh yeah, a huge advocate for therapy.
Of
But when I
course.
first came out of NXIVM, I was really creeped out by therapy because a lot of the techniques that they used were kind of like butchered versions of,
Mm.
therapeutic processes. So even talk therapy really irked me. And I
Mhm.
was like, no, no. So I was resistant for a while. And then there came a point where I was like, okay, I need a professional.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
could
what's
see how
going
that would
on.
feel triggering because it probably
Totally.
reminded you of, is that sort of like what they would do with an EM?
Yes,
I know
it
all the
felt like
terms.
manipulation. I know, I love it. It was like an EM, but even just the thought of being questioned and led somewhere felt icky to me.
Mm.
And had to rebuild my trust that there were good people who actually cared and were not going to try to use or exploit me. Because before, um, when I had left Albany and relocated to New York City to try to find a job, basically,
Mhm.
because I was, everything around me was falling apart. And I thought, well, if I can just keep a job, maybe this thing will pass.
Yeah.
That's like kind of how I was thinking about it, and not, but um, that was kind of my way of just taking care of myself in the best that I knew how, and I wasn't ready to talk at all about experiences. I could barely. I mean, it took me more than 6 months after leaving to even say that something sexual had happened.
Mhm.
So that's how deeply buried these things can be. So
Yeah.
it was a long process to even get there.
Mhm. How do you feel? Did you watch it, Seduced?
Yes,
Are
yes,
you happy
I've
with how
watched
it
it.
came out?
I am. I'm really happy about how it came out, and I'm really pleased with the things that I was able to do as an executive producer and make sure that Jane Does were concealed, that minors were blurred, that people were protected. We even offered therapy to anybody who worked on our project, either as a subject or on the crew.
That's
So
amazing.
we wanted to make sure that people were really cared for, and that was very important to me because I had just come out of a very horrible experience with the media where I felt like I was totally blindsided, and it was scary for me, and I didn't want anybody to feel that way.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, I'm again, like I think it's amazing that you did it, even though if it was uncomfortable, I think it really helped like so many people. And I'm sure a lot of other members of the group who, might have like disappeared kind of and are dealing with what you're dealing with but standing up and being that voice for them, I'm sure it's going to help them into therapy and walk through it too. So that's awesome.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I started with a deprogrammer though, which sounds really weird and like kind of sci-fi, but
Uh-huh.
the deprogrammer was her name is Diane Ben Scooter, and that was before I did any therapy, and we just talked, and all she would do is ask me questions, and a good deprogrammer is intended to rebuild your critical thinking so that
Mhm.
you can think for yourself and not think in that closed loop of in what the indoctrination was trying to teach you, like, oh, this is good, this is always good, like it's very
Yeah.
difficult to break out of that mindset. So she helped me do that, and then from there I tried a whole bunch of other therapies and different things to see what would work and what would help.
Yeah, and was part of that sort of learning more to trust your gut? Because I'm sure, like, along the
Yes.
way, your gut probably was telling you that something was off, but then there would be someone else there kind of, talking you out of it. Is that
Hmm.
kind of
Totally, you hit the nail on the head.
and I feel like so many people can relate to that. It's like you can be in a bad relationship with a guy who like sucks and you don't want to be with him, and then you'll rationalize it in your
Hmm.
head and like you'll just ignore that voice. I'm still like trying to really work on, like, I feel like it's like a constant process. And I don't know if that's
Same.
something from like childhood, like, or not you specifically, but like with anyone with their intuition, like where along the way that can get lost for some of us, but like that's like a constant thing that I'm like, sometimes I really have to like I'll like automatically want to like text people and be like, what do you think about this, what do you think about this, and it's like, no, like sit by yourself, like, and like really like take
I'm
it in.
I have to do that all the time. Like the amount of text messages that don't go through are quite high. And
That's
it's
part of the work.
yeah, it is. And I think it's part about trusting yourself and knowing that you know shit too. Like
Mm-hmm.
and that your feelings are valid. And for me, while I was in NXIVM, intuition was strongly discouraged. I mean, they used to say, well, it's pseudoscience. Like, how can you even prove it? So they were very strategic about what they
Mm-hmm.
diminished and what they promoted. Oh, logical thinking, data, all the shit that they were trying to get us to believe, which ultimately a lot of us did, had us diminish our intuition and our feelings to our guts. The EM specifically disconnected you from your feeling about things, and the feeling
What
is in your body. So, and I know
right.
that's crazy to think, but imagine like there's a stimulus outside of you. Like every time your boyfriend raises his eyebrow, you get scared.
Mhm.
So in an EM, they would break that stimulus response so that you didn't feel that scary feeling when your boyfriend raised your eyebrow and you think, oh my God, I'm liberated of this problem. Thank you so much. I feel so much more capable of handling the world around me. What you don't realize is that you're actually becoming more numb to things because they're
Wow.
disconnecting that feeling. So that can be used, that tool can be used maybe for your benefit, but mostly it was used so that people were less dependent on the things outside of them and solely dependent on Nexium.
So I'm sure there was like a
So
lot of
tricky stuff.
yeah, and I'm sure you kind of had to de-thaw from some of that stuff too, and like in getting back in
Yeah.
touch with like feeling your feelings and all that stuff too, and knowing
And
it's okay to feel
feeling your
that.
gut.
Yeah,
Right.
it
And
seemed
also
like.
to trust it.
Mm-hmm. Is there
That
any
was hard.
like, yeah, is there any specific things that you can recall that you learned in therapy that I mean, like, I feel like it's easier said than done, like trust your gut. Like, are there any sort of it's like great, how do I
I
do
know.
that?
We
You
should
know?
right, we should get little pins like trust your
Yeah.
gut. It's like, oh yeah, okay. But really it's a practice. And there were a lot of things that different therapists said to me that were helpful. And I think for one, it's just been finding the right kind of formula that makes me feel better. And a lot of that has to do with exercise and physical activity. Like, I really rely a lot on that because sometimes I don't really want to talk about it anymore. And
Mhm.
I just want to punch the shit out of something. And, and it's, and that's okay because that's how I process things. And I guess for me, I was kind of judging that, oh, I have to do it this way, or I have to read that book, or I have to talk to that therapist. And that's not true. Like, trust your timing.
Were you someone who was into like searching for the answer kind of thing before you got into Nexium?
Yes and no. I mean, I
Mhm.
grew up here in Los Angeles, and it's like the mecca of personal growth and
Mhm.
self-help. So there was a part of me that was kind of like, ugh, not another
Mhm.
workshop. And then
Yeah.
I also,
Another one.
I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to go to your orgasm retreat right now. Like, there
Wait,
were a
I
lot
have
of
2 friends who did one of those. Have you heard of that one?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've
Yeah.
heard of a lot of
It
them.
yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, there's wild shit out there. Some of it's great and some of it's snake oil. So you just have to
Mm.
kind of determine that for yourself, sadly, but
Mhm.
also trusting people to give you good, incredible resources and doing your own research, which for Nexium, my mom and I did not do. So
Yeah.
we just trusted our friend, and our friend recommended it to us. She was that friend that, how you always have the girlfriend that tells you where to eat, what to watch, where, like, who to sleep with, who to not sleep with. She was like that woman for us, but with personal growth. So my guard was already kind of down.
Yeah, I noticed like that there was like a lot of Buddhas in your house. So like what the or your mom's house. So it's like okay, like
Oh
they're
yeah,
a family who loves like spiritual, like it totally makes sense, like how it's like, oh
we
cool, like
are.
what's this thing? Like not that Buddhas mean anything, but like, you could just I just feel like it's like if you're already like a yeah.
Have a crystal on my desk right
There's so
now.
many crystals to
So
the left of me, I just can't reach them.
I mean, I
But
love it all. I think
yeah, me
I'm
too.
not, I consider myself someone sort of spiritual, and like
Mhm.
that to me is a very personal thing.
Mhm.
I think it's something great. I've relied on something bigger than myself a lot, especially recently when I feel overwhelmed. And so I do consider myself a spiritual person. I think it does make sense that we would be open to that, but there were
Mhm.
plenty of people in Nexium specifically who didn't have that background. So it's always kind of an interesting thing to look at, like, how did that person get there? And
Mhm.
what was their particular vulnerability, or what was the hole that they were trying to fill? And it's not like we're talking about super broken people. We're talking about
Mhm.
people who just want to be better.
Totally. And like I'm sober, so I'm in a bunch of 12-step programs, and it's like before that, like when I was like fucked up, I never thought about like trying to improve myself. But once I got sober, it's like this whole world opens up, and then it's like you want to keep uncover, discover, discard, figure out how you can improve and make things better, and like fill that God-sized hole, some say. And like I feel like everyone, as people in the world, we all want that like fix it button. We all want to like flip the switch and like be good to go. And like I noticed that some of the programs in NXIVM and some of the teachings and what I saw, like it looked good. Like despite all of the negative aspects, like I'm so curious about the teachings and like if you learned any tools or like if it was beneficial to you outside of all of the horrible stuff, like the program itself and like what you learned. Like I'm so curious about that.
That's a good question, because there has to be enough good for people to want to stay. Like why would, if the curriculum, and I'm using air quotes because really a lot of what they did was just stolen from other modalities, and you could find that in a credible self-help book. But what they did was use other people's styles, and the way that they packaged it was very well marketed, and they used people of influence or status to recruit other people, so it gave it legitimacy. I learned a lot, and I don't discount that, because one of the main things that I've had to work on with a therapist is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like an experience is so multifaceted that it can be bad, but you can learn so much from it. I don't think that their curriculum itself is good, because at its core it was created by Keith Raniere and he was using it for a bad intention. But I definitely learned a lot of things that I could have learned elsewhere, but I happened to learn them in NXIVM. And they help me even now, strangely, because they're regular things that you kind of need to learn to be a grown-ass person.
Like what?
like personal responsibility, or having control of your emotions, or being someone who doesn't blame and actually looks at the world as like, how did I get involved with this? How did I become responsible for this decision? All of those things were the types of questions that you might talk about in an NXIVM course. Like, what is responsibility? How are you responsible for this outcome? How about that? But they took it to the extreme where there were no victims of anything. And that's not true. But that was part of their indoctrination, was to show you how you couldn't be victimized, so that they could kind of do whatever they wanted to you, and it would be in the name of self-help.
Yeah, I know it's probably hard.
Sense?
Yeah, it does. I know it's probably hard to guess, but do you think it started out like innocently and he grew like hungry with power? Or do you think this was like all a part of a master plan?
Oof, that was one of the hardest things that I had to grapple with after I left, because I really wanted to convince myself that it was innocent and went awry. And what I realized as I did more research once I left was that that wasn't the truth, that actually Keith Raniere had been doing these things to young women for decades, and minors as well. And even back in the 90s, he created an MLM that stole a lot of money from people, called CBI. And I even learned while filming Seduced that one of the women that we interviewed was a former girlfriend of his, that 20 years plus, he gave a contract, a master slave contract to her to be in a sexual relationship. And when I heard that, my mouth dropped and I was like, holy shit, he has been doing this for years. He's been preparing these sort of sick ideas that he wanted to do for years. And this was just the right time and experimental group that he practiced on. That's the kind of person that he is. So I like to think that, I wanted to think that it was more innocent than it was, but I learned that it wasn't.
Well, it's good that you know that and can look at that honestly and, be an acceptance of that. Cause I'm sure that's like, a big, I'm sure that's big and hard. And I totally get how
it's hard.
It's like hard to process. It's like being blindsided, but not,
Yeah, and
Um,
it's difficult to see yourself as someone who made decisions that endangered yourself and other people
mhm.
because nobody wants to be that kind of person. I mean, if you are, you're doing it. If you aren't, I mean, for us, a majority of the people that were in NXIVM were good people. So they weren't looking to exploit one another. It was really mostly the top tier of the
Mhm.
organization that knew what they were doing.
So, oh, people like Nancy as well. Like, I feel like there's not enough blame on her. Like, I
I
feel
mean,
like it seemed like she
she's
kind of
gotten
got
off
away
really
with
well.
more. I mean, because it kind of seemed like they obviously, like, Keith is like in charge of everything, but it kind of seemed like it was them two together.
Oh, for sure it was. He couldn't
Yeah,
have had NXIVM. He could not have had ESP or NXIVM without Nancy Salzman or Claire Bronfman's money.
right. So they must have known everything, like all of the evil master plan sort of thing.
I think they knew a lot, but
Yeah.
another thing that I learned about these types of groups, and they were charged under a RICO status, which is similar to the mafia.
Hmm.
And what they did that was smart, and I don't like giving them a ton of credit, but they were smart at this, is that they compartmentalized information so that only a couple people knew some things that Keith was doing, then the others were enforcers of his positive propaganda, then maybe another group was recruiting, and another group was just there to look pretty and make people
Wow.
feel comfortable. Like that was how he did things, and he structured them, and he used people depending on what they could bring. And for one, Claire brought the money, Nancy brought the brainchild of the self-help history that she had with NLP, and many other people brought value to him that he used for his own benefit, but all
How,
very strategic.
yeah, how did, from an insider perspective, like it seemed like everyone was very like Keith was very alluring to everyone on the inside. Like I can understand when you're in that kind of bubble, like, you know, what was it about him? Like did you understand it at first, or was it something you like grew to, because I know you're like under a spell, sort of, so to speak. Like I'm
Yes,
sure, yeah.
yes.
Like what is
I
it
think
about him that everyone found so interesting?
similar to Miramax and Harvey
Mhm.
Weinstein, actually, I think one of the things that he did was that he created the propaganda that he wanted people to believe about him. So when I first came in, I was just a student. I really didn't know anything about Keith. And you don't meet him until you go to Albany, which means you've already done an extensive amount of curriculum. So
Mm.
you're being indoctrinated, but you're not aware of it, and you're being coerced. Well, that's like the definition of coercion.
Mhm.
You're being led in a direction that you're not aware that you're going. And part of that is to idolize Keith. And so, and at first I was like, I don't care about this guy. Like, I came here to
Yeah.
do the class. Like, he's just this tiny little guy playing volleyball. The first time I met him,
Yeah.
he was playing volleyball, and I was like unimpressed.
And
He
did
looked like
he
a little
suck? Did
Teddy
he
Graham.
suck? Wait, did he suck
No,
at
he
volleyball?
doesn't
And you
suck. No.
I
I
was
was like, and I
dying to know
played
if
volleyball. He
I was dying to
doesn't
know if everyone
actually.
had to pretend he was good.
Oh my god, that would be so funny. Like if he was a king or something, and everyone had to pretend that he was good at volleyball. He was actually pretty good at volleyball. He's an athlete, blah blah. But he is. I played volleyball in high school, and so they were always trying to get me to play. And there was something about it. I was like, even when I was in DOS, I was like resistant to the volleyball stuff.
Hmm.
And I played one time with him, and he's good. He's a setter. He can get the ball up. Not anymore because he's in jail. But um, and and so for me, I was not impressed with him. It wasn't until like years of additional indoctrination that I started to feel an admiration for him, and a desire to express my gratitude to him. Like that all came later. And then when I was in DOS, I it was you had to be nice. Like you
Mhm.
had to comply with his demands. That's how you stay unpunished. I mean, that doesn't really last very long. But it that's why I hope that it came across in the series that this stuff isn't anything that happens overnight. Like, this is a long period of grooming that I think people who have experienced other predators like Jeffrey Epstein's or the Harvey Weinstein know that it's not like 1 minute and then you're in bed with the guy. He's breaking down barriers with you slowly with his knowledge that there's going to be a point where you're going to break, and that he's going to have you in the palm of his hands. And that's what these types of people do. So,
and it seemed like, I mean, he seemed like one of those kind of guys who had like an answer for everything, you know? So I'm sure like when you're kind of under that spell, like it probably does seem like he really knows a lot and that you're learning a lot from him. And that whole like kind of guru disciple relationship, I feel like he played pretty well.
Very well. I mean, I thought he was my friend. I actually believed that we were close and that he knew many things about me that other people didn't know. He used to share with me that he was dyslexic and I'm dyslexic, so there were things that he was trying to bond over with me, and there was an emotional connection there, but it was very much like a disciple guru dynamic, and that lent itself very well to DOS because of the master slave structure.
Did you see like any sort of like hint of like, did you have an opinion about him at any point on your own? And then you were like, I can't think that, I was swayed?
Yes. I remember one day we were on a walk and he started to tell me about his girlfriends. And I was like, okay, why are we talking about this? Like, it really kind of it felt like it was out of left field. Like, I'm not the kind of girl that also really registers if someone's hitting on you right away. Like, sometimes I have to do it.
Yeah.
Someone has to tell. Yeah, someone has
like
to
they were
like really hitting on you. Yeah, exactly. I'm like that. There were. So this was one of those moments, unfortunately, with Raniere, where I didn't really get what he was trying to sell. And he said to me, you know, I require what was his words? He's like, I require monogamy with my partners, but I'm polyamorous. And they all know this and they all agree to this. And I remember looking at him like, what? Like, why are you telling me this? And what I didn't realize at the time was he was kind of asking me to be okay with that, to be a girlfriend. But I had no desire to be his girlfriend, not at all. Like, for me, I wasn't sexually attracted to him. Every time he would touch me, I would recoil, and I blamed myself, thinking, oh my God, what's wrong with you? You're so defected because you don't feel comfortable around this guy. But really, those were my instincts that I was overriding. And it was in that moment that I started to change my opinion about him slightly, because I realized that he just wanted what he wanted, but I also couldn't really think that because I was in DOS and I had to see him as this good person with ultimately good intentions. And so I kind of just buried that in the background and didn't even think about that conversation until I was with the FBI and I told them that story. And they were like, didn't you think that was strange? And I was like, I didn't even register that was his invitation into this harem. And so there were many moments like that. And unfortunately, if you questioned or if you were negative or not supportive of Keith or DOS or anything, you were punished, and usually verbally or physically.
Yeah.
And that was DOS, and DOS was another level.
Were you happy in DOS, or did you feel like you got into this thing and now there's collateral, and like, were there moments of it that you enjoyed, or did you kind of did that start to make you feel more trapped? And like, kind of like put the pressure cooker, like kind of, whatever that analogy would be.
I wish. No. I really wish that I had been. I wish that I had felt afraid of what was going on while I was in there, but there were really only a couple moments that I remember feeling fear. And that is because anytime, excuse me, anytime that we would feel a reaction to DOS or to what we were being asked to do, we were told to get an EM on it. So
Mm.
there was very little fear that I was feeling because it had all kind of been buried and diminished with the EMs. So it wasn't until afterwards that I started to feel the fear appropriately of all the blackmail that they had over me. And that wasn't until I left and I began having panic attacks because I was out and I could start to feel again. So there were many moments in DOS where I thought that I was just having fun with my friends and that I believed in what we were doing and I believed what we were doing was good. That was not the case for everybody. There was one woman in my group specifically who pretty much from the time that she committed was questioning and was feeling trapped and terrified. And every time she would come to Albany, she would just cry in Allison's living room. And they would send me over to her and be like, make her feel better. Like tell her all the good things about DOS. And I'd be like, okay. So innocently, I would go over there and I'd be like, I'm sorry that you're not feeling so good. Like, what's going on? How can I help you? And that was the way that I was used in a lot of ways, was to make people feel comfortable and normalize things like a lure to bring in other women that I was totally unaware that I was being used for that purpose. And I mean, I've obviously felt enormous amount of guilt over that, but I also now see what was going on a lot better than before. So no, there were moments where I was like, this sucks. I hate it. I'm starving and I'm hungry and I'm tired and I'm cold and I don't want to do this and I don't want to go to volleyball. And like, there were many moments like that, but it was overridden with this intense positivity and feeling of friendship and camaraderie that I thought I was building.
Why was volleyball at like 3 a.m? Why were the walks at like 3? Why was everything like how did he have so much energy? Like, did he take Adderall
all day long?
Oh, okay. I was so curious about his energy levels because I'm like, I don't have energy for any of this.
I think mostly what happened was we were being told that he, worked nonstop and that he slept very little. That was the internal propaganda going around. But really what I learned afterwards was that most of the time he slept during the day and then did what he wanted to do at nighttime. And part of that was to show your willingness to be uncomfortable. So you would show up at volleyball when it was cold, when it was late. It was the last thing that you wanted to do in your day, but you were loyal. So you would show up. And that was just one other kind of check mark to verify how loyal you were. And the walks were that too.
Has that, oh, and also how is there always like a recording of the walk? I was so curious about that.
He wanted that. So anytime he was talking or sharing new ideas, sorry, it makes me laugh, but because they're not new ideas, he wanted it to be tracked. So he would have things filmed, he would have things recorded, he would insist that other people do it. And that was part of his narcissism, was thinking, oh my God, I'm changing the world. So I need to track all of this for the future to be able to listen to me. I mean, like now, if I listen to anything Keith Raniere related, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy even saying? Like, it all sounds so crazy to me. But back then, I was trying so hard to do well in the program that I made it make sense. I made it make sense for me too, a lot.
Would he be like, grab your phone? Like, I got a good thing. Like, I got something good going. Like that.
Yeah.
And wow.
Yeah. Like, do you have your phone? Do you have your phone? We should record this. It's like, okay, here we go. We're solving the problems of the world. We're solving the problems of the world from Clifton Park. Here we are with Keith Raniere. It's like, no.
And would he have people? Would he have people transcribing his recordings?
Yeah, he did. He had people transcribe them. He had people turn them into articles that he would then circulate or want printed. I mean, he really thought he was. I think he still does, like sort of a messiah.
Wow. Yeah. I think there's like some mental illness with that. I mean, besides the narcissism and like the sociopath and psychopath behavior, I think like people like really believing, like one of my thoughts was like, oh, he's just doing the same thing in jail right now. Like, I'm sure he's finding
I think he
inmates
is.
and like manipulating them, and like, and I'm everyone there is in a vulnerable place. Like, I'm sure he's just finding his new version of that. Like, I feel like these people just kind of keep going.
They do, and I even saw that when I read my victim impact statement, because that was the first time that I spoke to him since he was, I mean, since he was arrested. And
In
so
court.
I in court. Yeah, and
Wow.
that was back in on October 27th. I spoke with 14 other people who shared their truths, and it was kind of extraordinary to watch his responses because it was like nobody was there. He's incapable of feeling empathy. And I went in there knowing that, but I also didn't think that I would be that shocked by it. But
Hmm.
it was actually affirming because I realized, oh, I'm not special. Like, he is literally incapable of feeling any empathy for people. So even as we really shared for us and we shared for the judge in the hopes that he would get life in prison, which he did. So it worked, but it was also extraordinary to see how much someone will not accept reality when they're in that kind of narcissistic bubble. Like, he was still calling us liars when we were speaking out. So
So
it was
sick.
shocking. But it's also not shocking because that's how they are. They'll go down kicking and screaming to the end of the earth to prove that they're right and someone's wrong. And that also, I mean, that's also why I think he got 120 years. He's not safe to be in
Hmm.
society.
Absolutely. What was that like reading the victim statement? Like, did you feel, yeah, I'll just let you tell me instead of trying to guess.
No, no, you could guess away. It was a mix of emotions, but
Yeah, that
it
makes sense.
it was intense. It was intense, and I could have given a lot of excuses, but I
Mhm.
made a pact with my friend who also spoke, who I love dearly, and she's been just such a pillar of strength for me. She's a Jane
Mhm.
Doe, so she
Mhm.
stays private. Um, but I was like, okay, I'll go if you go. But it's COVID, like everything is working against us. I didn't want to I didn't want to do it.
Mhm.
I didn't want to go to New York. And so when I spoke, I kind of had to just coach myself through it the day before, or the day before I actually flew in. And then the next day I spoke at sentencing. Sorry. Um, I kept telling myself, like, okay, anybody can do anything for 8 minutes. Like, anyone can do
Yeah.
anything for 8 minutes. It's only 8 minutes. Like, I recorded it so I would know. I was ready in my little Airbnb practicing. I was like, God damn it, I wish I had a sedative. Like, like I was really, really nervous. And I was
Yeah,
like,
of
it's too early
course.
to drink wine. Like anything. It was so uncomfortable. And I didn't know what to expect. And so I just didn't want to think about it. I was just get there and read it and do it. And I was in the middle of the queue of people who spoke, and I was shaking for sure. I was shaking. And I just made the decision last minute that I was going to address Keith to his face, and I was also going to speak to the judge because I didn't know if I was going to be able to look at him, but I
Yeah.
did. And I just made certain points very clear when I said them to him because I wanted them to land, whether he's
Mhm.
not going to feel it, but it was
That's
really just for
amazing.
me.
Yeah.
And it was my way of just like getting these things out of me with words. And I felt really calm
Mhm.
afterwards, like strangely calm. And then it took me about 2 weeks to kind of feel normal again after that. I
Mhm.
didn't realize that it was going to take so much out of me emotionally. And I didn't have a break because I was still in the middle of this whole press run with Seduced.
Mhm.
I came back, and the next day, I think I did like Good Morning, I don't know, Good Day LA, whatever it was. It was a blur. It was some morning news channel, and they're like, "How was it?" I'm like, "I literally just got back into your COVID test,
Oh
so
my
here we
God.
go." But
Yeah.
so I feel like these past couple weeks to having a little bit more downtime has been nice because I've been able to kind of process what just happened.
What have you been doing for self-care?
Um, let's see, a lot of cooking at home. That's fun for me, and my fiance is a chef, so that really helps. um, with the self-care and cooking element.
Yeah.
And I have been taking a lot more baths.
Hmm.
Sometimes I even find that in the middle of the day, if I have like a couple podcasts or calls, I'll just get in the bath with some Epsom salts, and that's really like relaxing. I have my two kitties, so I take breaks, petting breaks with them. And and what else have I been doing? I've been doing a lot more boxing these days, which I'm enjoying. And that's kind of my self version of self-care. It's a weird one, but it works for me. And I have also been rereading a book called The Body Keeps the Score,
I
which
have
I
that.
recommend for, yep, I thought you would. I recommend anyone who has had trauma read it because I feel like he's talking to me the whole time. And it's just really enlightening, and it's helped me understand myself a lot better.
Yeah, I have it on audiobook and paperback. And for some reason, it's been hard for me to open because I was worried that if I open up this book, it was going to open up this whole like crazy thing. But um it's not.
I felt that way, and I
Yeah.
avoided the book. I just
Mhm.
started. I avoided the book for a long time because my mom was always like mothers do. You should read this. You should read this. You should
Yeah.
read this. Like, no, not another self-help book, please. And then I actually cracked it open, and then I also got the audio, and so I've been listening to that. And it's a lot. I need to take breaks from it. It's really dense, but it is helpful.
Yeah. When you I'm sure at the time, like when your mom was doing everything she could to try to get you out, like I could totally see it being like my mom is so fucking, like your mom trying to like pick you up from a high school party and you're like so fucking embarrassed kind of thing. Um,
That
is
is
that,
that is how I felt while I was in. I was just
yeah.
like humiliated and betrayed, and I felt like everyone was looking in my underwear drawer, and I felt
Mhm,
totally exposed. And I was also getting a lot of influence from the NXIVM higher ups telling
mhm,
me, your mom's a psychopath. She's trying to destroy you. She's going to try to hurt you. She has Munchausen's by proxy. Like they were telling me all this crazy shit about my mom that at moments, I was like, wait a minute. This is my mom. This is my mom who raised me. My mom is not a sociopath. Like I know my mother. But I was also so confused and really vulnerable at the time that I trusted these people, and I believed a lot of the things that they were saying about my mom, like, oh, she's just trying to reinvent herself and all of that. But there was
mm.
always this little piece of me that was like, I don't know. I don't know. And I kept a hope that we would resolve this. I thought at the time, oh, this is just a problem that my mom and I need to deal with, and we'll get over it. I didn't see it as a much bigger thing. That's what my mother saw, and that I couldn't see because I was too close inside of the bubble. Um,
Yeah, you probably
but
also
when
didn't
I was
even
there,
see some of that because you
I
didn't,
didn't, and I was
right.
discouraged from reading. I was discouraged from reading it. I was discouraged from watching her on the news. It was also really scary because I was getting lots of calls for people. There were reporters in the neighborhood, and I was being told to not talk to anybody, including my mom.
How did it feel after watching and having when you had a different perspective on everything, like to see like how incredible and how how much she loves you and fought for you, like was that, I'm sure that was an incredible feeling to see it from like a different, did you have like a change of heart kind of with it all?
Well, in stages, yes.
Mhm.
So throughout, even through, we were healing even through the filming of Seduced. And
Yeah.
so up until this point, when we started to do press together, it was like just this extraordinary amount of gratitude that I felt for my mom and what she did for me and what she was willing to sacrifice, that it makes me want to cry now
Of
because
course, yeah.
I just don't think that I knew how much she loved me, and that was just so affirming, and also felt like we just had such a deep respect for each other because we knew now why, in a spiritual way, like why we had to do what we did. And
Mhm.
even though I was, one of the last men standing, if you will, she knew that she had to fight it from the outside and I had to fight it from the inside. And there was something kind of healing and understanding that it wasn't about us being, against each other. It was actually us working for the same team, just
Mhm.
didn't feel or look like that at the time. And so we have grown a lot as a mother-daughter, and I just feel so lucky to have her.
Yeah, she looks so amazing. So yeah,
Yes,
it's
she
great to
is.
see that you have like such great support like from your family and that you can like fall into that
So
safety
much.
net after that. And your grandma
It's
is so
it saved me.
fierce. I love your
I
grandma.
know, she's the best. I miss her. I hate that she's in Europe. It's really bumming me out because I wish that I could see her, but COVID is,
Mhm.
she's in her 80s. She's not flying anytime soon.
Yeah.
And so I miss her a lot, but like my mom did so many extraordinary things that I actually learned while I read her book. And that
Hmm.
was after I came out. And one of them is she started a foundation before I was even out that was offering resources and therapy to any anyone who had left a high control group, but specifically NXIVM defectors. And so there was a lot of people who got therapy because of my mom, or were able to have a place to live because of my mom, even
Wow.
before while I was still in. And so
That's
we are
incredible.
now working together on this foundation. It's called the Catherine Oxenberg Foundation, to try to bring more money and resources so that other people can have what my mom gave me, which was just the gift of healing. And so many people leave cults and they have no money, they have no connection to their previous careers or family because they've cut it all off. And it's so hard to start your life again. So I hope that we can make that successful.
That's amazing. And yeah, so now like there's so many questions I still have, but I don't want to eat up all your time. Can I ask a couple more?
We can talk it. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, because I
And
feel it.
if we need it, it's
Okay.
like if we need another talk in the new year, we can do that too.
Thank
If we have
you.
more to discuss by then.
Thank you. Honestly, like I'm so fascinated by all of this and you're so great to talk to.
No, I
So
love
it's
it.
like it's so hard to not I don't want to bombard you though. So I wrote down things because I didn't want to forget because sometimes I'm like, fuck, I should ask that. Did you ever
Oh,
sneak out to go do anything while you lived up there in Albany? And then you're like, oh, like I want to get away and go do this like fun thing. And I know like, you know what I mean? Like I'm
yes,
gonna go sneak off
I
and go do this.
did.
What was it?
Yeah. Okay, I did a couple of them actually. Um, well, it's weird to think because at the time I think I was 25 or 26 and I was living in Albany, and kind of the only way that we could get away with going to New York was if it was related to enrollment. So if you're like, oh, I've been working really hard and I set up some enrollment meetings and they're all in New York City or they're in Los Angeles, and they would like give you permission to leave and to go. I'm talking about Allison Mack here.
Mhm.
And so I remember there were two trips that I made where I lied that I was going for recruitment, but really I was meeting a guy. And I was so scared to tell Allison, and I freaking thought that she would just find out, like she was some psychic or something, and she would just smell it on me and know that I was doing something bad. She didn't, but I ended up like sleeping with this guy in New York City and feeling like, what the hell did I just do? They're gonna find out. I'm gonna get in so much trouble. And I didn't tell anybody. I only told my one friend who I mentioned before, who I made that pact with
Yeah.
to go speak at sentencing, because she was like my close girlfriend who we got each other. And then I did it again when I went to visit
A different
my
guy?
family, a different guy, and some guy that I had known like from high school or something. And I feel like it was just my way of asserting a little bit of free
Mm.
will. Like, I'm going to do this and no one's going to find out and I can do whatever I want, which unfortunately was not the case in DOS at all. But it was like, I think I kind of felt like desperate. Like I was
Mhm.
trying to just assert some sense of control or anonymity or something in my life. Um, and so I ended up just sleeping with those two random guys. I mean, nothing came of it, but it was just, and afterwards I was like, why did I even do it? Both were really terrible in bed, sorry. But and I was like not having good experiences, obviously, in Albany, being, in a horribly weird sexual thing with Keith that I felt uncomfortable with every time. So I thought maybe these guys would make me feel better
Yeah,
about my
totally.
own sexuality because I thought that I
Hmm.
was kind of broken or fucked up. And both times I was so scared that they were going to see my brand. I remember being like, "Oh yeah, I really prefer, let's just have sex in the dark."
Yeah.
Like I was just trying so hard to conceal this other part of my life. I felt like I
Hmm.
was living two different worlds, and I can relate so much to your AA
Hmm.
reference because I feel that way myself in a lot in my own healing and recovery is that there's certain triggers that I intentionally avoid. There's certain people who I've totally cut out of my life because they're still loyal to the group, and that is
Yeah.
really difficult. And I
Hmm.
also think like this is just going to be a part of my life. Like healing from this will be continual. It won't always be bad. It's like 12
Hmm.
steps. You
One day at
go
a
through it
time.
and
Yeah.
one day at a time. And I don't really think about it like, oh, I'm totally healed now and I can do whatever I want because that's not how this stuff works. Like there's always stuff
Mhm.
bubbling up that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and I'm sure like a memory will come up and you'll be like, "Oh, there's more work to be done." Like I feel like there's always more work to be done with anything like, and I'm sure like a lot of this stuff like for me like my own personal work that I do in therapy like there's like everything is like tied into my fucking childhood. Of course, you know what I mean? And it's like all of these
Yeah.
like and it's like damn like still like and it always like takes me back there, it's like it's crazy how it's like there's just so much to like uncover. I feel like in therapy in general with even like your life outside of this, and I'm sure it like ties
Yeah.
into all this stuff. um
I think even just being in a relationship brings up
yeah.
so much, and I avoided that for
Hmm.
as long as I could because I thought that was going to be the thing that was going to trap me, and then I
Hmm.
would feel stuck and I would feel
Okay.
like re-traumatized by it. What I didn't realize is that's called an unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
Like in a healthy relationship, you don't feel trapped. You
Hmm.
feel like you're your own person, you make your own decisions. Sure, the other person can make you upset or whatnot, but you can share it and you can get over it. That was not the case in an abusive relationship or
Hmm.
dynamic like it was. So learning.
Yeah. And then I was gonna ask you, how do you, and you don't have to answer this, but how do you feel about the way that some of the people in the vow were depicted? Do you feel like it was truthful? Like, do you feel like they kind of catered to making it look good?
Hmm. Well, it's a good question. I haven't had a lot of contact with many of the people that were in the vow, and I actually haven't watched it yet because I was
Okay.
trying to just stay focused on Seduced. But um, I think that all of those people are really, really brave, and what they did before I was even out was extraordinarily difficult and scary for them. And I think mostly they're just trying to restart their lives and they're trying to get back to what they lost, and all of us lost a ton of time, a ton of money, and other things, and we're still trying to heal from that. And NXIVM has created a lot of messes for people and their personal relationships and their ability to get work and whatnot. So for
Mm,
me, I think that it's fair. I think that the vow is fair and it gives more of that overarching overview of NXIVM even before I was involved. And so they did a really good job at explaining that, and they focus more on the whistleblowers and the people who
mhm,
brought this to the world's attention through the New York Times with my mother. And Seduced really focus on the survivors and on the misogyny
mhm.
and on what it was like to be on the inside of DOS. And so it's just a different angle. And um I think it really spoke to a lot of people because it was so
Mhm.
personal.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I appreciated how personal it was as well. Okay, two questions, and then I'll let you go if that's okay. Um,
Okay, sure.
I don't want to say I'll let you go. Is that? I'm like careful about everything I'm saying. No. What was
release you.
I know.
I don't
like in my head about.
I love that you're a comedian because we can joke about this stuff. That is a huge part of healing, by the way.
Yeah.
Just being able to laugh at yourself. Like I even remember asking somebody for permission to do something. I was like, "Oh, can I do this?" And I was like, "What the hell am I doing? I haven't asked you shit." I was like, "I'm gonna do this."
Yeah.
So I think you have to laugh.
Wait, was Keith actually funny? Like, I feel like, or like how you see like people like laughing at, like, I've watched so many different cult documentaries, and I feel like something I always see in common is like the head person, the guru, whatever you want to call him, like he always says some like little joke and everyone like thinks it's so funny. Like
I wouldn't say that he was like a funny guy. I think I think that was maybe a lot of politeness, and sure, at times he made kind of like perverted jokes, which are hard not to laugh at.
It was like, wait, what?
But there are other times where he made really perverted jokes that are like horrible and they don't land, and people are still kind of like crickets, or maybe one person laughs because they're so uncomfortable. But he wasn't like a comedian. I think who was more funny was Lauren. Lauren Salzman had a really great sense of humor, and she was a very good performer. I feel really sad about Lauren's story, actually. She was more charismatic. He was charismatic in his own way because that's how he attracted people, but he wasn't all that funny.
What was
he was goofy?
Yeah, totally.
Like he walked with a limp, and
a real limp,
like small, like a real limp, in his knee.
How tall was he?
And I think he's only about 5'6", 5'7". So he's little.
Yeah. What was your? I'm just thinking about him. That's why I'm laughing. What? Not your type? Yeah, no one's type.
Not my type.
No one's type.
I mean, some people, but at least there's someone for everyone out there. But not Keith Raniere, unless he has a very nice roommate in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, right. What was your big like breaking point, bottom line? Like when did everything kind of come to a head and you're like, I'm done?
Oh, way
was
too
there like
late.
a specific?
I wish it was sooner.
But was there like
there wasn't one moment? Okay. There wasn't one moment, and I think some people have that, and I've heard that described in other kind of cult situations or even abusive situations where they're like the walls just shattered and I knew the truth. That wasn't how it was for me. It was more just stages and layers of truths that accumulated to then finding those tapes where Keith was saying what the brand was going to be and what the sacrificial ceremony was going to look like and how he wanted it to look consensual. When I heard that, I could not rationalize it as good anymore at all. Like that was a huge defining moment for me in seeing NXIVM and Keith and DOS for what it really was.
I can't believe you found those.
I know, that was like divine.
Wow. So going forward on a more positive note, I know you just like took a trip with a pizza oven.
Oh yeah, I did. That's why we couldn't speak last week. So my last week was I went with Patrick to Texas, and we picked up a truck in order to tow a mobile wood fire oven that we towed from the south all the way back to LA, so we can do pop-up outdoor pizzas. And fun. I love working with food. Yeah, so it should be, well, we can do like private events or pop up on the street. We're still working on getting the machine all running perfectly, but it's beautiful and it's enormous, and I hope that it can work out in COVID because everything is so restricted. So
Mhm.
we're working on that, and I'm his assistant.
I love that, because I remember in the beginning you had talked about wanting to have a baking business. Like, does this itch that scratch for you kind of thing?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally, because it's not it doesn't all the weight doesn't land on me. It mostly is on him because he's the pizza chef.
Yeah.
And so I get to just be the person that takes money and interacts with people and passes the food, which is a great job for me. And it definitely scratches my food itch.
How often do you guys eat pizza? Does he make it all the time?
A lot. He makes it a lot, and his day job right now is at a pizza place in Venice.
Mhm.
And so I mean, I can go in there anytime and eat a pizza. I try not
That's
to,
so
but
fun.
it's but mostly we've been cooking. We've mostly been cooking at home, and so he has
Yeah.
2 little ovens that he uses for
That's
practice.
so fun. I want a pizza oven.
Yeah, we usually, like, sometimes it makes too many, we just give them to our neighbors in our building and, like, run down the hallway of the apartment and be like, "Hey, you want a pepperoni?" Like,
That's so
so
fun.
so then we'll eat them all.
I love it. Healing through food, right?
Exactly. Exactly. It
Well,
really does. It works.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on. It was so fun to get to meet with you and over
Thank you.
Zoom and interview, and yeah, and thank you for just being so open and honest and authentic, and I think, this really helps so many people. So you're doing,
Thank
really
you.
good work with everything. Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. It was so
Yeah, of
fun.
course. Yeah.
I feel like I worked up a sweat.
I'm so Did you
I
see
know, soaked.
I'm sweating. I have the hugest sweat stain.
Fun to
I
imagine if we were
no,
in
I
person.
I got this like natural deodorant from like a company for free to like try and post on my Instagram. And like I was like, "Oh, I'll do like a detox thing," and it does not work. Like I'm just like
You should do a
I'm
funny
I'm
commercial. I
sweating
mean,
so
obviously not
much.
for them.
I can't stop
Like,
sweating. I'm gonna have to go
because
back to the regular.
let me see. I used a natural too, at like a Tom's, and
Right.
it does not stop you from sweating, and it really doesn't really stop the stink that much, but it's
Yeah.
better than just straight BO.
Yeah, it's like, well, I was like, oh, I'll like detox my body during this time. And like, cause I was using like men's deodorant for like 15 years. And I was like, oh, like clean up my body, like whatever. And
Right.
it's not working.
Good thing we're working from home and no one has to smell us.
I know. Thank you, India. Appreciate it.
Thank you.